All right, guys. I think it's time we had that talk. It's the talk that I know a lot of you guys want to have right now because it kind of feels good right now as a Seahawks fan to have. It's the talk that keeps coming up in my streams. It's the talk that has clearly become one of the dominant stories of the NFL through 6 weeks. And I kind of told myself, I'm not really going to get into this stuff this season when you know what happened many, many months ago. I kind of said to myself, whatever happens over in Denver now with you know who, I'm not really going to get into it too much, especially once the season starts. I'm going to focus on my team. And whatever happens over there, I don't want to become that guy who gets obsessed with every single thing that Denver does, and I turn my channel into some kind of like Denver Broncos watch thing. Just let it happen. But yeah, we need to talk about this because this matters. This really matters, what is going on right now in Denver with Russell Wilson. Yeah, I said his name. So I think it's time that we actually address this, and not just for the obvious reasons, right? Because there are obvious reasons why what is going on in Denver right now matters to the Seahawks. And on that front, just to address that real quick, I mean, it looks awesome right now. We are currently in line to get pick number 7. Because of tiebreakers, we are in the same range as a lot of other teams in that 5 to 12 range. All those teams in that range are 2 and 4, or the teams that originally had the picks are 2 and 4. So right now we have pick 7, and you take a look at the schedule. With the way the Broncos are playing, it's kind of impossible for them to have a guaranteed win or even a penciled-in win because they can't score. And when you can't score, you can't put a team away. And when you can't put a team away, every game's going to be close. But you look at the rest of this schedule, at this point, knowing what the Broncos have, looking at what they've shown through 6 weeks, I see a 4-win team. They look terrible to me. And I know their defense is probably going to bail them out and win a couple of games, but a couple of games being the key word there, because you look at this schedule, it gets brutal. The Jets and the Jaguars, they might be able to win those games, but those are not the gimmies that you would have assumed going into the season. The Jets are playing good. Jacksonville's mostly been competitive this year. They played well against the best team in the league. And that game's on a neutral field, by the way, so no home field advantage. Okay, they've probably got a pretty good chance to beat the Raiders at home. At Carolina, against the Cardinals at home. Okay, they're probably going to have advantages there, but nothing is guaranteed. I see this Denver team winning 4 games this year. I really do. I didn't believe that was possible before the season started. Honestly, I thought they were pretty much penciled in to have a winning record at minimum. So yeah, that's big. I smell a top 5 pick. I think we are getting a top 5 pick from the Broncos at this point. What I saw last night in that game kind of convinced me that it's happening. It's really happening now. So that's wonderful, obviously, but this matters for reasons beyond just a draft pick, right? Yes, we all understand that the Broncos losing helps us because we own their first and second round pick this year, or next year, but that's not the only reason why this matters. And again, I said I wasn't really going to talk about this that much in videos this year, but what is happening right now is so stark, so obvious, so extreme that I think I got to. And I'm aware of the fact that I might be jinxing it, or I might end up, maybe a month from now, everything's okay over in Denver, and I end up looking back at this video as the time when I spoke a little too soon. But it's so bad right now, I don't see how that happens. I can't imagine any way that this stuff corrects itself. And I'm not just talking about that Broncos team. I'm talking about Russell Wilson specifically. When we made the Wilson trade, I knew that Wilson was past his prime. I knew that. That was obvious. Like, to me, anybody watching football with any tiny little scrap of objectivity could acknowledge that. Like, I watched him play last year. I was rooting for the team that he was on last year. I can tell he's past his prime. But I never in a million years believed that he was washed up. But through 6 games, that is exactly what the heck he is. Like, this is not a matter of him just being, you know, adjusting to a new team. This is not a matter of him just going through a little bit of a rough patch here. This is not a matter of him just underachieving a little bit. No. Based off what we've seen through 6 weeks, he is fully washed up. And I don't think there's any way to put it other than at this point you have to call him one of the 5 worst starting quarterbacks in the league. Genuinely a net negative for the team that he is on. And you combine that with a contract he signed, and I can't believe we're here. I knew the Wilson thing could go kind of bad for Denver because I'd seen the problems and I talked about the problems a lot, but not this bad. And what I just said, let me qualify that here, okay? The Denver Broncos through 6 games have the worst offense in the league, okay? They are averaging 15.2 points a game. And 2 of those points came on defense because it was the safety against Garoppolo. So if you take that out, they are actually averaging 14.8 points a game. They are the only offense in the NFL averaging less than 15 points a game. So they are, in terms of points scored, worse than the Chicago Bears with Justin Fields. They are worse than the team that is quarterbacked by Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett in a tandem. The Carson Wentz quarterback team, the Baker Mayfield quarterbacked team, the Matt Ryan quarterbacked team. All of these teams are scoring more than the Denver Broncos. So just in terms of the most important role for any offense, and therefore the quarterback, because I think we all understand that the quarterback is the guy who carries the most responsibility on the field for the offense. He's failing more than anybody else in the league right now. And remember, some of the quarterbacks in this league are backups, like Cooper Rush. Cooper Rush has played almost the whole season for the Cowboys. A career backup journeyman who nobody thought anything of is outscoring Wilson. His offense is putting up more points than Wilson's offense. You got a backup quarterback taking over in San Francisco. They're scoring a little more than 5.5 points a game more than the Broncos. Look at the Dolphins using 3 different quarterbacks this year. Look at pretty much any team. You can, like the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns actually have an upper level offense in terms of points scored so far this year with their backup quarterback because of the Watson suspension. So on that level, they are the worst, but it goes beyond just what the offense is scoring. That's the most basic of levels. You look at the advanced metrics, they're 29th in EPA per drive, which, look that stat up if you're not too familiar with it. It's a really good way of capturing how successful each play is because it basically calculates how many points were added to your expected total based off the success or failure of that play. They're 30th in success rate, 31st in points per drive, so it's not just a matter of, oh, they never get the ball. No, they're getting the ball plenty, they just can't score. So the advanced metrics back up what we see with the points per game. This is probably, I don't see any other way to put it, the worst offense in the NFL. And Wilson absolutely needs to own that. And individually, I mean, you can look at some of the numbers here too. Just let's start with the quarterback rating. Not my favorite stat, but it's a decent way to encapsulate everything that's going on with a player. It's at least a try. Throw Brian Hoyer out because he only threw 6 passes this year, but Russell Wilson, take Brian Hoyer out, is 22nd in the league in quarterback rating. So he's down with the guys like Carson Wentz and Davis Mills, Kyler Murray. Stafford's not playing very well this year. He's down there too. He's below Matt Ryan. He's below Mariota by a pretty wide margin. He's a little bit ahead of like Trubisky and Cooper Rush. So in this area, you can see that he's at the very least below average. And most of these guys who are below him, based off these first 6 games, I would rather have them than Wilson. Because, like look at Brissett. Brissett's not putting up great numbers, but his offense is scoring. He's got a QB rating that's several points below Wilson's, but his offense is actually producing at a high level. They're scoring more points than the Seahawks. They have, I think it's a top 8 offense, right? Let me check real quick here to be sure. Yeah, it's seventh. It's number 7 in the league in points scored per game. So yeah, I would 100% take Jacoby through 6 games over Wilson's first 6 games. And look at completion percentage. And this one's crazy because Wilson, throughout most of his career in Seattle, even when things weren't great, was always reasonably accurate. But if you go by a completion percentage, you can throw out a few of these guys because they don't have enough attempts. Like, again, Brian Hoyer has 6. So forget about that. But Wilson's barely a starter by this metric. He barely belongs as a starting NFL quarterback. He's down here with Baker Mayfield and Justin Fields and Cooper Rush. Joe Flacco has a higher completion percentage than Russell Wilson. So, obviously, you know what people are going to say. Oh, it's the coach. Hackett sucks. And look, Hackett does suck. But you know who else sucks? Adam Gase. You know who else sucks? Josh McDaniels. That didn't stop Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, or I should flip that actually, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady from having excellent seasons when those were the guys running the respective offenses. Okay, Peyton Manning was able to win MVP, break the touchdown record with Adam Gase as his offensive coordinator. Tom Brady won all those rings and had all that production with Josh McDaniels as his offensive coordinator. Those quarterbacks, the great quarterbacks of my era of watching football, did not let a dumbass coach ruin their offense. They took over the offense, they did whatever they needed to do, and they made it one of the great offenses in the NFL those years. So don't tell me it's just the coach. Don't tell me it's just Nathaniel Hackett being terrible. There are things quarterbacks can do to overcome that stuff. People are going to say it's the offensive line. I mean, isn't it time we start learning our lesson here a little bit? Okay, isn't it time we start learning a valuable lesson about what a quarterback can do to make an offensive line look better or worse? Like, it seems to me that we have plenty of evidence just watching Seahawks games these last decade plus to understand that it's not just purely the offensive line. You want to talk about his receivers? Yeah, he probably wishes he had the Seattle receivers back, honestly. Probably wishes he could get those guys back right now. But are those guys in Denver so terrible that this is understandable? Jerry Jeudy had almost 1,000 yards his rookie year with, who was it? Bridgewater, Locke, Trevor Siemian, Brock, I don't even remember. Some garbage quarterback that was one of the reasons why they made the Russell Wilson trade. Cortland Sutton had a 1,000-yard season. I think it was even 1,100 yards with, I think it was Drew Lock. So these guys have proven they can play in this league. They are good players. Remember this offseason, everyone talking about Albert O, the tight end, how great he was going to be? They're about ready to cut him because he doesn't do anything. He had 5 catches against Seattle, and that's probably going to be his career high at this point because he's got nothing. I know things aren't perfect over there. And look, if Wilson's offense was below average, like 20th in the league in points, and his stats were, maybe he had like a QB rating of like, I don't know, 90, 91, and the team was kind of sort of struggling, but they weren't bad, then you can bring that stuff to me. You can talk about, hey, he's being held back by this, he's being held back by that. You can't tell me any of this excuses him being, through 6 games, probably the worst quarterback in the league. And I know that sounds like an extreme thing to say. I know a lot of people are going to say, no, there's no way he's worse than Baker Mayfield or Cooper Rush or Justin Fields. And that maybe, but the results have been worst in the league. The Denver offense is the worst offense in the league. I don't see any other offense that can even come close to their ineptitude. And he's got to own that. When you're the quarterback, you have a lot of control over what your offense does or doesn't do. All right? And that includes being able to overcome bad coaching, bad play calling, questionable teammates when I don't think Wilson's teammates in Denver are that questionable except maybe the offensive line. but it's not enough. So the reason why I'm talking about all this is that, look, when the Seahawks decided to trade Wilson, they were making one of the all-time gambles in NFL history. They were saying, you know what? We don't know for sure if Wilson is done or not. We don't know what he is completely, because in 2020 he threw 40 touchdowns and was in the MVP race for a good chunk of the year. He had a great year that year. 2021, I watched him play. I wasn't impressed. He did put up good numbers. He had the good quarterback rating. It looked like things were getting a little better at the end of the year, maybe. So we didn't know if Wilson was done, and we had no backup plan behind Wilson. And we decided to trade him anyway, which was kind of unprecedented in NFL history. When NFL history tells us that when a team has a franchise quarterback, they cling on to him until he disintegrates, basically. The few times you see a team move on from their franchise quarterback before he's turned to dust, it's usually because they have the next guy ready to go behind him, like Brett Favre with Aaron Rodgers. They know that he doesn't have too much left, like Joe Montana. Maybe they think the guy is just a big personality problem, like that's kind of what happened with Jay Cutler. Or there's some extenuating circumstance, but that wasn't the case with Wilson. Okay? We as Seahawks fans were having intense debates after pretty much every game, after pretty much every day, about whether or not Wilson was still a top quarterback. It was not, the science was not settled on Wilson, and then we decided to trade him. And if Wilson had gone to Denver and regained his form as an elite quarterback and had some MVP caliber year, it would have been looked at as one of the all-time bad trades. Now, I believed more likely was that Wilson was going to continue to be Wilson. He was still going to be good, still going to be solid, effective. He was going to make that Denver offense explosive. He was going to also have some limitations. And at the end of the day, you'd look at Wilson and say, hey, he's still a really good quarterback. I didn't think he was going to regain his greatness. I did think that his weaknesses were going to affect him more now that he was older and less physically capable of doing the things that he used to do with his mobility. Maybe he would start to lose his arm. That was his greatest asset, his arm strength and his deep ball. But I never thought everything was just going to go at once. His deep ball isn't even that good this year. Like, he had last night, the deep ball to KJ Hamler. Terrible ball. Just like the deep ball he threw to Jerry Jeudy week 1. Now, both passes got completed, but not good throws at all. So, did the Seahawks, and here's the thing. So, did the Seahawks just pull off the greatest trade in NFL history? That's kind of what I'm getting to here. Through 6 games, it seems like we're headed that way. If Wilson does not turn things around immediately, like you've got 2 winnable games coming up if you're the Broncos, and then the schedule is starting to turn on you. You're playing the Titans. It doesn't get terrible initially. You've still got the Panthers. You've got some winnable games there, but very quickly you're playing the Chiefs. You're playing the Chargers again, and the Chargers are going to be way more healthy when you play them at the end of the year. You're playing the Ravens. You're playing the Rams. And by that point in the season, the Rams will probably be a little bit better than they are now at least. And you're playing them on the road anyway. So it's got to pretty much happen now. But when you look at historically one-sided trades in the NFL, usually it's not the player, the superstar, immediately just turns into one of the worst players in the league at his position, right? Like Herschel Walker, the Herschel Walker trade, a benchmark for terrible NFL trades, but Herschel Walker went to the Vikings and was still a pretty good player. Like the year after the trade, he had 1,000 yards from scrimmage and double-digit touchdowns. Pretty decent yard per carry average. Productive. He was a productive player for his couple years in Minnesota. It just wasn't worth anywhere near what they gave up for him, but he was still a good running back. You look at other lopsided deals throughout NFL history. The only one I can think of that approaches this is Carson Palmer for 2 first-round picks, and then they let him go after 8 games. That's the only one I can think of, because in the other ones, usually at least you got a little something. At least you got some kind of return back. It just didn't compare to what you gave up. Like maybe we'll look back on the Matt Stafford trade as being an all-time terrible trade if Stafford really only had that one great year with the Rams, but at least he had the one great year and the Rams won the Super Bowl off of it, so how bad can it be? So, is that where we're headed right now? Are we headed to a place where we look back at this Russell Wilson trade and say, not only did we get it right, not only did we get it more right than any team in NFL history has ever gotten anything right on something that other teams would never have even tried doing, but did we make the greatest trade in NFL history? That's where this is headed right now, because Wilson is sitting on this monster albatross of a contract, and right now he is a net negative player. Find me another trade that resulted in you giving up a player with net negative value, with a negative value, and getting all these picks and players back. It's crazy how fast things have turned. And the last thing I want to say about this is there are going to be some people out there who might say, well, Wilson is going to bounce back. It's impossible for players don't go bad this quickly. A player doesn't go from elite to terrible this quickly. And they actually kind of do, okay? And look this up. I'm not making this up. 2 recent examples, just off the top of my head. Brett Favre, 2009, his first year with the Vikings, was actually one of the best years of his career. He was in the MVP race. His numbers were at an all-time high. His completion percentage was through the roof. His numbers were very comparable to the years he won 3 straight MVP awards. So 2009, Brett Favre had one of his best seasons ever, maybe his best season ever by QB rating it is. He goes out there the next year and he's awful. The Vikings offense completely collapses. He goes from one of the best quarterbacks in the league to maybe the worst starter in the league in one offseason. So it happened fast there. And what about Peyton Manning? I remember watching Peyton Manning fall apart at the end. 2014, most of the year, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. By the end of the year, the last month and a half, something had changed and he was still good, but he wasn't a great quarterback anymore. And then the next year he came back, and from the very first game that year all the way through, he was kind of one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, one of the worst starters. Now, he still had his mind, he still was able to do some things, but he turned into a complete turnover machine. He was not really able to get the ball down the field at all. I think the Denver offense was one of the worst offenses in the league. His QB rating was right at the bottom of the league in terms of NFL starters. It happened in like less than half a season. He went from one of the best to one of the worst. And then by the end of that year, he retired. Now, there were other reasons why he did that. But at the end of the day, you look at him and he went from one of the best to one of the worst in less than half a season. So the truth is, it does happen fast. And a lot of the time when it's happening, you don't want to admit it's happening because you feel like, wait, I just saw that guy a few months ago killing it. So you convince yourself that it's not actually happening because how can this be happening? This doesn't make any sense. It's impossible. I think it is possible, and I think it's happening. And I know he's a little bit younger than you would expect a player to fall off like this, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. And I want to say this right now. It's looking like we nailed this decision in a way that I never thought we would. I thought we could win the trade, but I didn't think we were going to be laughing all the way to the bank on it. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think. And it had to be addressed, so there it is. Long video addressing everything that needs to be talked about. See y'all later.